Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Solis residential focused webinar, Power More Homes with Solis, Cost Effective Solar and Storage. Just a few quick items before we get going for any newcomers today. So during the webinar, all attendees will be muted for best audio quality. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type in your questions. Those will be monitored. This webinar will be recorded and shared with all of you within 1 week of today's session. And it is my pleasure to welcome back Terrence Parker from Solis. With nearly 34 years in renewable energy, Terrence has witnessed the solar industry's growth from small PV systems to multi-megawatt urban PV sites. Since 2010, he has specialized in PV string inverter manufacturing, applications engineering, and compliance. Terrence is a founding member of Solis's North America's team and has served as a compliance and applications engineering manager for the past 9 years. Without further ado, I will pass it over to you, Terrence.
Thanks, Tatum. Appreciate it. It's good to be here with everybody. I was recently in Canada and talking about our residential system, and I'd really like to kind of get into some details here. And if you have any questions at all about the product or how we're introducing it or what Charge is doing with the product and what's available, that kind of thing, jump right in. And you can either you can put your questions right there in the chat or in the question box. Jason will be handling that. Thanks, Jason. So let me get right into it. A lot of this has to do with, making sure we use our bucks, our dollars carefully when we're talking about these systems. Solar, everybody's gotten kind of used to the costs of grid tie solar, and now that we're adding batteries, so the overall system price has gone up a little bit, and so there'll be some extra sales involved in that, and people will be looking for ways to trim down that initial cost. And I'd like to go over a few of those things with you. I'll go off camera here for a little bit and talk about to you about how we can really, make these systems a bit more cost effective, even though we're adding in these new batteries that are adding so much more capability to the systems. So I'll talk, about Solis and who we are and why maybe you should take a look at our products. And then I'll get into our string inverters, and that's kind of a rock solid product that I've been working with since 2016 when I joined the company. And well, it's been installed in the United States since 2011. Remember, Solis was the first Chinese company to get a UL listing here in North America. And so we started working with Sunrun in the early days, doing white labeling with them. And we started installing our second generation grid tie inverters. I'll talk to you a little bit about that here. And they're very much in the same form that we used in the past. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. And well, they've been installed since 2011. So we've had product, our second generation 2G product, we called it, in the field since 2011, certainly through its 10-year warranty already. And well, we're up to, well, our 4G, our fourth generation, and into our we started changing over from generation to series, and so Series 5 and Series 6 is also out, and that's what our residential storage inverter is. It's what we call our Series 6 inverters. It's literally 4 generations above what we used to install back in 2011. And along with that is its little partner called the SolisHub, and we'll talk how those two things work together. And well, as you know, well, when I was young, as Tatum mentioned, I've been in the business for a little while. Every system had batteries when I got into solar, and well, it really adds a lot to the system when you have batteries in your system. And we used to get, as an installer, I used to get paid when those batteries were bubbling. That's what I'd hear, Jason. I'd hear, those lead acid batteries bubbling, and I knew the system was charging, and so I could ask the customer for my paycheck, And then grid tie came along, and I was able to show the customer his meter spinning backwards. That was always a great sight and a great way to maybe stimulate the customer to give you your final check. And though I must say today, though, communications is so important because really sometimes you just can't get paid until the customer sees it right there on their phone. Isn't that true? And so the monitoring platform is really important. So bankability is something we talk a lot about at Solar because we at Solis because we've been around a long time. We've been here since 2005, and we got here in 2009, and we went public in 2019, and really started bringing out that Solis brand name. As I note, we've been working in Canada with Canadian Solar as a white label partner for them, and we today work with Jinko and Fortress and a bunch of others. But generally, though, you're going to find the Solis brand inverters under the actual Solis brand. And lately, we've been building a lot of factories. We've been building up our factories in China, and we opened up a new factory in Vietnam. And we're taking a look at how we might do some manufacturing here in the United States. There's some benefits to being manufactured in the United States now under the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act. And there's a lot of money in climate change in there, and good tax incentives for inverters and other components in a solar system. And so Solis is, as many other companies are, taking a look at how we can set up a manufacturing operation here in the U.S. And that'd be interesting. And I think really the other interesting thing for Canadian installers is that we might, actually, we're looking at maybe getting some sort of warehouse space, or maybe some sort of space where we can land some products. So it just takes a little less time to get it across the border and into your hands for any RMAs or anything like that. So uh, this is something we like to show a lot of our customers, and you're welcome to, if you happen to visit China, you can come and visit this plant. It's actually right near the water, and those hills you see in the background there are very beautiful and easy to tour around in. They shoot a lot of film, actually, in China, in those hills outside of Ningbo, China, which is south of Shanghai. So you'd fly into Shanghai, and we'd pick you up at the airport there and take you to our factory, brand new, very much automated. There's a Starbucks in there. It's quite a modern factory. And I think the distinguishing, or let's say differentiator, with this particular factory is the amount of burn-in and testing we do on product. So we're still at 100% product burn-in, meaning that we'll take the product and hang it on a rack for 4 hours in a 44C room and run it at 99% just to make sure that it's a working product before we put it in the box. And so it's a distinguishing feature. It helps us maintain our reputation for reliability. And indeed, third-party validated for reliability. We are actually considering a 25-year warranty on our product. That would make it substantially more expensive, I suppose, but indeed is something that we could think about because of the evaluation that this company did, and on our own confidence that the useful life range is near 20 years for sure. And we've proven it right here in North America, as we have systems, like I say, installed since 2011. That's 13-year performance so far. Uh, but we've really committed to the United States. We in North America in general. I'm in North America next week, actually, and so I feel like our team, all of us here, I mean, Ukrainian and Chinese and Egyptian and Turkish and Mexican and good old Midwestern boy like myself, has really been welcomed into this very diverse team and quality team. We've been able to get a bunch of great folks to fill in our quality team, for example, our marketing group, our service group, which we're very proud of, and I'll talk a lot about. And we have a full leadership team right here in the United States. But it's that service, I think, that I hope that you'll gain some great confidence in. We have an 866 number. It's on my email, and I encourage you to call that 866 number right after this webinar. And I'm promising to you someone will pick up that phone. And every call that is called in is logged into our CRM system. And so even though some folks might call my name, might call my number up and ask for some help, and that's fine. I'm at Canada Service and charges service for any sort of troubleshooting or issues you're having with our product. But I always also encourage folks to log in this particular issue in our CRM system. And so that ticket can then be followed and tracked. And so it's a nice way for you to feel a little confidence that, hey, this isn't being left behind or something like that. And so, well, we promise that most of your issues will be solved within a couple of days because actually, within the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes, we're able to identify whether or not that's an immediate RMA or whether or not we need to maybe refer you to maybe a video or an app note or something like that that might help out. Um, so
This might
let's
be
talk.
just a good time to jump into one of the
Yeah, Jason.
questions.
Yeah, yeah.
Jeff has asked, with all the changes, products being dropped as the technology evolves, what is the serviceability of the original product?
Right. So we have full backward compatibility with our product. Actually, that product that we installed in 2011 is very similar to the product that we're installing today in 2024. It's still that 4G platform you'll notice in the product name of our residential inverters 3.6 to 10K. And they are all completely parallelable, they can be on the same AC bus, all of that with our newest product. And so there's no issues with let's say, backward compatibility with our second generation inverters working, for example, with our new Series 6 inverters. Yeah. That answer the question, you think, Jason?
Yep, I think that's perfect.
Yeah, it's something that we worry a little bit about. We worry about backward compatibility, and it's especially, and when grid tie, it's not such a big deal. We're pretty much just making sure that we're not overloading the bus or anything like that. But when it comes to battery systems and ESS, or however you want to term these new systems, compatibility with one battery with another or one inverter with another, this becomes an issue. And I think some of my competitors, Tesla and others, are running into this issue with backward compatibility. And this is something that Solis is very much focused on here as we look and we introduce this whole product line to you as a way to really take a look at how can I solve a lot of problems with my residential customers? And one of them is to install, of course, 120 or 240 volt inverters. But, there's might be opportunity in some of these larger homes or farms or something like that might have a business being run out of their home or a big shop, maybe some compressors or a welder, something like that. And they might actually use some 208 three-phase in some of these larger homes. And so I kind of wanted to introduce it as a potential inverter that you could use in homes in Canada. And a 208, of course, is a very common voltage there, and as is 12240 for residential, of course. And in that area, we still have that classic grid tie inverter you see down there in the lower left. That's the dude that's been just the rock for us. It's virtually in the same form that it has been since 2011, and we've just upgraded it. We've just made it, increase the current capability of the MPPT so they can handle those big modules, and of course, it's all SB, the latest certifications to the 2018 interconnection standard. And of course, it has all the interoperability requirements for like Fortis and Hydro-Quebec and other places that are getting quite strict on how these systems operate when they're connected to their grid. And we can talk in detail about how these systems have the capability of being when you're during commissioning, you can set up a particular profiler, what we call a standard, a utility grid standard, and then you can get in and you can actually change those values to exactly match that particular utility's requirements. So grid type, super easy install, very lightweight and small, and you can install these things. A 10K is quite easy to pick up one guy, no problem. And as I note, it's ready for the most recent modules, and it has all the communication capabilities and safety capabilities, that you want in a modern inverter. We'll focus a lot here, though, on that residential hybrid, where, I believe that this sort of hybrid platform is really going to be the new platform. Why get a grid tie inverter when you can get a hybrid inverter that is a grid tie inverter? And it also has a capability of attaching a battery. And then we'll talk also about the SolisHub. This is a big deal. This is the kind of a line tie solution as opposed to your classic load side connection that you can do with our residential or hybrids or grid tie inverters. So look at this. I mean, you can really do a lot with these high voltage hybrids. You can, AC coupling is possible. DC coupling, you'll see, is kind of our main way to go to market here. We can do partial home. We can do whole home. We can do time of use stuff. And yeah, the hybrids are more expensive than the grid tie, but you do get so much more capability. There's so much more to sell when you're selling a system with batteries. When you're selling a system that's grid tie, you're pretty much just talking about cash flow. But when you're talking about hybrids that have batteries, you're talking about resiliency and security and so many other things. It's a lot of fun to sell, truthfully. And these inverters are kind of no drama kind of things. You have type 2 surge protection on both the AC and DC side. You have leakage current suppression, ground fault protection. Arc fault, of course, is standard. No fuse designs in any of these systems. We only put no more than two in parallel with each other on any of our MPPTs, so fuses aren't required. I've done a lot of work with Charge in Canada with our commercial products, and indeed our commercial products are the same way. Every MPPT has no more than two inputs to it, and so no fuses are required. Arc fault is standard. It's really a board that we've been working on since 2011, and we really started. Well, admittedly, we had some issues with it in 2015, 2016 when I first joined the company, but we really started working those out by 2017. And now we are the manufacturer, remember, and so we are making these boards. And so through the years, over the last 8 years, we've had a lot of experience in coming up with a board that's not going to give you false alarms. We don't want these things too sensitive where they're detecting, a little bit of moisture and they're sending you, causing you a truck roll. No, we want to make sure that these are real alarms. And so it'll watch that alarm, if it's strong enough, of course, first time it'll send the alarm. But if it's not quite strong or it's, it's a little bit, it'll wait and only send the alarm code when it feels, yeah, this is something that we need to service right away, and the inverter will shut down, and then the alarm will tell you what string it's on. And so, when you're comparing this against something like a Solar Edge or an Enphase that has a module level monitoring, we only have string level monitoring. So it's going to lower, it's going to be able to kind of help you identify where the arc fault is, but then you're going to have to find it within that string. So it's easy to install these products. As I know, we call them a plus product because it looks identical to the product that we installed with Sunrun back in 2012. But indeed, it is upgraded. It has, it's capable of being, let's say in on the same bus as a Tesla Powerwall or something like that. It can work with a grid forming product. You can work it with our product. Let's say you have a Solis inverter on your system with that you put some PV on, back in 2015 or something like that, and now you decide to put in a hybrid that I'll talk about here. When the grid goes down, the hybrid will grid form, and then your little inverter will come back on, and you can, of course, use that PV to service the loads and things during that power outage. So very flexible. You have it has a low startup voltage, so you can make these very small strings, with these new PV modules with 40 volts, 42 volts nominal. A string of 3 could work on these inverters. And of course, it goes all the way up to 520 in the operating range. And so you get this wide operating range that you're going to be able to pull power from, in the early morning and late evening. These inverters are still, even with 10% loading, are over 97% efficient. It just blows me away, Jason, truthfully. And what has happened in the PV string inverter technologies is we're seeing better surge capabilities, better capabilities to handle these wide operating ranges, and just the toughness of these products through the years have proven themselves. So the flexibility goes to not only, how you can set up your PV strings, and there's pretty much anywhere from 3 to 12 is your design reference. And if you need to put in this rapid shutdown, and I know this isn't quite as big a deal, I wanted to kind of touch on this a little bit because I'm a little concern that maybe we might see some more of this in Canada is the rapid shutdown requirements on roofs. Today, you're not required to put these things on every module, but that sort of thing is required in the States. And so it's gotten some pushback, truthfully, and so we've had to be a bit flexible as an inverter manufacturer to ensure that if you do need the transmitters, they're available, factory integrated. But if you don't need them, you don't need them, and so we can supply the inverters however you like. But indeed, it's
Should
about
probably just jump in there for 1 second, Terrence, and just let everybody on the call know. All of the stock of the Solis inverters we have, do you have the AP Smart transmitter installed from the factory?
And you'll see some of our model names actually have like a dash APST for that AP Smart transmitter that we factory integrate. And so that's kind of your clue, everybody out there who's looking at the model numbers of these inverters, is if you want to have, or you are curious to know what transmitter has been factory installed in there, you look at the very end of the model name and it'll have a dash APST on it if it has a factory installed AP Smart transmitter. Some little clue there. But that's just about reducing the SKUs, because I mean you can use an AP Smart transmitter externally, of course, like a Tigo transmitter or any of the available module level power electronic company products that you see out there these days. Of course, you can do that externally, but what we're talking about is reduction of SKUs, reduction of time, less packaging, less things to do on site when you're installing these systems, and so that's what Solis is about, simplicity, reducing need. Now, you also might have seen there, I skipped by it in a second here, but the flexibility also goes to the communications platform. You can use also, or Keshelin, whatever you like. We can send you the Modbus map, and you can map our inverters to any of those systems. We have our own monitoring and SolisCloud app for control of these inverters, and we encourage you to check it out. It's a global platform. It's very sweet. It's got a great app, and it's free, so you can't beat that. Just taking a quick look at the just very simple uh, grid tie inverter. You've got your wire box down below and your drivetrain up above, and the old LCD screen with 4 buttons there. And commissioning these inverters will take place within 3 minutes before the inverter even goes through its 5-minute timeout. Before it starts up, before that middle green light starts to glow, showing that you're operating and producing power. It'll be commissioned before you even get through that 5 minutes, because that's how long. I'll go through a little commissioning exercise here at the end, and you'll see it's basically setting the time, the date, the standard, turning on the AFCI, and you're done. So it's quite easy that way, and easy commissioning and no drama. That's what we're talking about. That's how we maintain margin on our jobs, right? LCD screen. You'll see on our new hybrid that we've upgraded to a Bluetooth configuration, and 14 amp inputs for those big modules. Revenue grade meter installed. Reliable design. Like I say, since 2011 we've had these in the field. And so the 208 product, again, this is something I was toying around with including in here, but I really wanted to introduce it, Jason. Tatum, I really feel like this is something that Charge, is going to have a lot of in their inventory, and this is something I think some large resi customers are going to get turned on to. Indeed, it can do 240 high leg if necessary, but straight 208 for Canada might be something that some of these larger homes and business homes that are running a business might take a look at. And this is kind of small, easy for 2 guys to pick up. That whole box on the side, the AC switch box there, where you might connect some conduit. That all is removable from the actual inverter itself, should you need to ever swap that out. And indeed, it has all that same flexibility with respect to communications or switching or rapid shutdown or any of that stuff. So. All right, let's talk a little bit about Resi. This is you can see the bottom of the inverter there. You got a lot of knockouts there. There's knockouts on the back. So if you wanted to make this super clean, you could actually come up through the wall and into the back of the inverter. And so it's really this is sort of, I think, it's very similar to our grid tie inverter, and I like to think of it as a grid tie inverter that's battery ready. Really, it works just like our grid tie inverters, and it comes in the same sizes. Instead of a 3.6, it's a 3.8. K as our smallest product, and then it goes up to 11.4, which is a little different than the grid tie stuff that only goes up to 10K. But as I note, this is a grid tie inverter, but it can also be just a battery management inverter as well, or both. It has 120/240 split phase output, which is unique for Solis because most of our inverters do not include a neutral. That is, you'll find that all of the inverters that you're working with are grid tie, smaller product that I just showed you. And should you get into this 208 inverter or even into our larger commercial inverters, you're going to find that it has a line 1, line 2, and a ground. Or in our three-phase line 1, line 2, line 3, and a ground, no neutral. And we derive a neutral with some math, and we don't really need it for our anti-islanding functionality and that sort of thing. And so it just is a way for us to reduce your cost, reduce time, and make your conduit a little skinnier, these sorts of things, because you don't need to run a neutral. But it's a little different with our 120/240 split phase product that you see here. This hybrid will tie into a standard double pole single throw breaker, but it will have a neutral as well because it can supply both 120 and 240. And when you set up, let's say, a backup panel, and we'll talk a little bit about how this inverter can back up your home, you have an opportunity here to run both 120 and 240 loads off of that backup panel. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And here's another thing, like I say, of that, just the growth of the PV string inverter platform. As you can see the kind of surge that you can get out of these inverters. 50 amps continuous, 47.5 officially, but 18.2K, 76 amps for 10 seconds. So, I mean, that kind of surge, it's not quite 2-to-1 like I used to see on some old Hart interface or old, trace engineering inverters with that big iron core in there, they could do practically twice the capacity for surge. It was really awesome. But with these new transformerless inverters, that was a bit of a weak point. But now, even now, we're seeing an improvement in that capability to handle surge. 76 amps is quite a bit of amps, and it can start some of these smaller, 2.5, 3-ton air conditioners. But when you get into 5-ton air conditioners, and you'll sometimes see this on these massive homes in the U.S. and I suppose Canada as well, right? In Toronto, Vancouver, these sorts of things. You see these massive homes with these 5-ton air conditioners, and they need a 100-amp start. And well, you can put soft starts and things like that on it, but you'll need a full 100 amps of capability if you really want to reliably start it. And so we're building towards that, actually. And then these new transformerless inverters are really building up a capability there. And so when you look at the inverter, you see the Bluetooth right there on the top left, and that's an interface that you're going to use. So generally, when you buy this inverter, you're looking at pretty much the BOM here is the inverter itself, that little communication stick you see on the bottom, hanging from the bottom there, and the SolisHub app. SolisHub app is what you're going to use to get into this inverter. And so you can just download that from wherever, SolisHub app. And so Type 4X, integrated revenue grade, DC or AC coupled with your batteries. You're going to commission this using your phone with Bluetooth, and you've got kind of a switch on the side to help you decide where you're going to put this inverter in operational mode. And should you feel as though, I mean, normally most folks, I'll talk a little bit about how to use this switch, but it's got 3 positions: bypass, off, and inverter. And there's different reasons why you'd set it in different places there, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Indeed, you can stack up to 3 of these easily in parallel, and we're working on stacking more. You'll see, of course, on the AC side, stacking them, let's say, as an AC combiner. you could put as many as 100 of these in parallel. But when I say stack up to 3 in parallel, I'm talking about the backup function. Okay, so as a grid tie inverter, just functioning as a grid tie inverter, you could set up 100 of these and parallel them all on an AC bus. But when it comes to paralleling on the DC, on the backup side, I'll talk a little bit more about that. And it's this open ecosystem that makes, I think, Solis really a unique product. It's about being able to use whatever battery you happen to have in stock. We had a great session with the home grid guys there recently. But Charge does a lot of other types of batteries, Pites, for example. And if a home grid isn't available, that's your first choice, and Pites might be your second choice. And that's a great thing about Solis, is that you have the opportunity to put together your system the most cost-effective way, the most, let's say, relaxing way, in that how to commission home grid batteries. You just know how to use the dip switches and that sort of thing. That's what you feel comfortable with. And so, that's the opportunity you have with this inverter, is to use the battery that you feel best with. And so that open ecosystem, of course, can be a double-edged sword. Don't get me wrong here, right? I mean, I look at my competitors and they kind of offer choice A or choice B, right? And maybe some customers are okay with that. But I want you guys out there to be able to really recognize a lot of these different battery manufacturers and the different kinds of capabilities that they have. Some are actual cell manufacturers and they manufacture the whole thing themselves. Others use quality cells and do the assembly of the battery pack. Some have this 9540A certification, which is for runaway. And that's kind of a clue for you guys that, well, some of these batteries just are a bit more tested than others. And so when you're commissioning this kind of inverter as opposed to a regular grid tie inverter, remember, a regular grid tie inverter really only has one operating mode, one primary mode, and that's feed in priority. When it's getting solar, it's feeding the loads, and as soon as the loads are satisfied, boom, it starts feeding into the grid. And so that you can do that, and you can set this inverter up, this hybrid inverter, for standard feed in priority mode, and that's how it will act. It'll act just like a regular grid tie inverter. And well, that's profitable in places, let's say we're in Michigan, where I'm calling you from, where you can still get 1-to-1 for your kilowatt hours. And so feed in priority mode is appropriate here. But I got to say, a lot of the utilities now are really only offering maybe, what they call avoided cost, maybe 3 cents, something like that. I'm not too sure if you see that in Canada, but yeah, in that case, it's not so profitable to just feed in anytime you want to. So it may actually be a bit more profitable for you to focus on charging up that battery to the max and then setting your battery to discharge at some particular time during the day. In California, for example, they call that time of use billing for utility. Maybe your bill is 4 times the cost between 4 and 8 p.m. And you might go into what we call backup mode here and kind of adjust your battery so that indeed it does charge up all day long and then discharge from 4 to 8 p.m. So when you go into your system, you're gonna do just like your grid tie commissioning. You're just gonna set the time and the date and the standard, turn on AFCI, make sure that the inverter set for 100% output, and then you're pretty much, and then you choose one of the primary modes. You're either gonna, like I say, it's based on your jurisdiction, and a lot of folks will use this self-use mode, where you're really controlling how you're charging and discharging that battery, and you kind of make all those fine adjustments when you go into this backup mode. And the only reason you go into off-grid mode is that you're actually installing off-grid. And so you don't have to switch to off-grid mode when the power goes out, for example. You'll kind of be in off-grid mode. But if you're going to be setting this up with no grid reference, if you're just going to be setting it up off-grid, this is a grid-forming inverter. So you can set this inverter off-grid and utilize these new high-voltage batteries for off-grid systems. And so the flexibility of this hybrid is quite amazing. As I note, it's still relatively easy to commission these systems. And I think the home grid guys last week will tell you it's relatively easy to commission their battery as well. And so, but there is it's not going to take 3 minutes anymore. It's going to take a few more minutes to, number one, just do your 3, 4 minutes setup of the grid tie product. And then another minute or so to set the battery mode. And then you're maybe gonna, if there's a particular customer who's told you that they're trying to avoid that heavy cost time, you're gonna go into battery mode and fine tune how it's discharged. So really,
There was one good question that popped in.
yeah.
If you're in an off-grid situation, how integrated is the automatic generator start? Or is there separate components they need?
Yeah. So if you're in an off-grid situation and you're just going to be tying in my hybrid here, and you're going to be now, and of course this is tied to the grid, so you're going to want to put a battery here. But yeah, you would use your standard ATS, and we have a control for that that you can tie into 24 volt and ground. You'll tie into the hybrid and just use, with the hybrid, you can control your generator, but that generator will be through a standard ATS, Jason. And so you'll on your off-grid system, you'll tie your generator in through a standard ATS, but you can use the control lines and tie that into your inverter.
Perfect.
In another solution I'm going to show you here, Jason, we're going to use a SolisHub, and we can use that off grid as well. And in that case, you would use your SolisHub as your virtual ATS, and you would tie not only your communication lines into the hub, but also your power lines into the hub. And I'll show you that here in a second. But this is your standard grid interactive, your regular hybrid, regular system. I mean, nothing fancy about this. This is the kind of thing where if there's some sticker shock when you talk about the battery, you might just say, hey, well, why don't we just set this up as a regular grid tie system, and we can talk about maybe the battery next year or something. Maybe you don't need as big a battery as we're talking about right now. Maybe you need a bigger battery given, well, heck, you lost power, for 3 days there, last March or whatever. It's an interesting conversation to have. This is what I really love about these inverters is you can set this up as just a standard grid tie product, but you can have a deeper conversation with the customer. In Michigan here, in the spring especially, we're a little worried about our basements flooding, and so we have sump pumps in our basement. And if we have an issue with the sump pump, with the power outage or something like that, and we're a little worried about our basement flooding, we might fire up the generator, to make sure that sump pump make sure my basement doesn't flood. So it's a big issue for us, and sometimes, it's hard to go on vacation, in the springtime if you're a little worried that your sump pump might not be operational in some storm. Well, this solves the problem. You can just set up your sump pump as a backup load on your system. You set the inverter black switch that's on the side there to bypass. You'll put in a battery and you're done. You can go on vacation or do whatever because now you have battery backup to that sump pump. And so you've dedicated the inverter to a particular load, kind of a partial backup or a particular critical load, just using it as a battery setup. And this is the cheapest system you could possibly install, right? And very easy to set up. And there's no PV involved, so it's something that you can again have those deep conversations with, for the customer who's really looking to back up some particular loads. He just wants essentially a UPS on some particular loads, maybe the kitchen, the security system, and a sump pump. And you can set this up just like this. Now, this is charging off the grid in this case. This is something you can't do in California. They won't allow you to charge the battery with all those fossil fuel stuff and then discharge the battery, potentially onto the grid. But in this case, we're using the battery here to run the backup loads. And so we'll set the inverter to charge off the grid. And so that's one of the things that you would do when you go into backup mode there. You'll actually set the inverter to charge off the grid because normally it's set not to charge the battery off the grid, only off of PV. Okay. And this is, the normal hybrid system where, you've got, a PV and a battery feeding your loads. And so, like I say, your hybrid is essentially your service entry, and your loads are your service panel in the home. Now, this is typical on-grid where you have a backup load panel. You split out some critical loads, maybe that sump pump, maybe that security system, something like that, where you just want zero interruption in those loads. You're okay with, the pool pump going out for a little while, or your big air conditioners going out for a while. You can live on some fans for a few days, that sort of thing. But you gotta have your security system up. You've got to have some critical loads going. Maybe that's nothing more than the Nintendo and the TV to keep the kids happy, these sorts of things. And so these sorts of systems, these partial home systems connected on the load side, are simple to install. You've got you don't need a electrician's license, to put breakers into your breaker box. You tie these in to the breaker box, you pull out a few loads, and you set up your battery to run those, and you've just got a really sweet little system. And I know this is a bit more complicated than those single lines, but I wanted to show you this because indeed here we're talking about two inverters in parallel at the main service panel, right? And then you've pulled out some loads into a backup panel, and you've paralleled the output of the two inverters into your backup panel. And you can be as much as 100% unbalanced, all 120 loads, that sort of thing. These inverters will really coordinate their activity to that backup panel because of the CAN bus connection between them. I know it's kind of a gross way to control your inverters these days, but indeed, we can hardwire essentially these inverters together, and they'll work as one for that backup panel. Another thing I wanted to point out here is the system emergency off button. This is a button that you can connect to your inverters, and this is a beautiful thing for the firemen who now they know that it's not just about rapid shutdown, but it also is about the potential for batteries powering up this backup load panel. So even when I hit that big red button to initiate rapid shutdown, I really haven't shut down the system, have I? And so if I can get a button that shuts down the PV, yeah, but also the battery and the inverter, well, that makes me a little bit more confident that I'm walking into a house with not a lot of DC conductors running through it live. But this is the kind of the star of the show. And you notice we put a door on it now. So it's no longer Type 4X. Now it's NEMA 3R. But it's a lockable door and much easier to deal with than trying to remove 8 screws and a big cover on the front. It also has an emergency power, has a rapid shutdown button on it, and the capability, of course, to run a remote system power off button as well. But the beauty of this product is the capability. Let's just take it off grid. The beauty of this panel is essentially your service panel for off grid. And then you can tie in all of your inverters into this dude. You can tie in your generator. You can tie in your EV charger into the hub, and then just run a load panel, which would be a normal service panel in a regular home, but in an off-grid cabin, it's now just your load panel. And this is a 200 amp pass-through, so you can run a big-ass cabin out there. But essentially, this is your service panel, service entry, and then you have your inverters below that paralleled in, and then your load panel. It's just an elegant way to coordinate the installation of off-grid system where the customer is really hot for high voltage batteries. Simple to install. It's pretty big, but it's about the size of a big service panel. Easy open hatch, organized for loads. You got load shedding in here. So instead of taking particular critical loads out and putting them in a backup panel, you can actually put them into this. And there's relays that you can control with your phone. And so you can load shed whenever you want, or you can turn your generator on and off. I mean, the kind of control that you're going to be able to get through a SolisHub and hybrid is just another level beyond the kind of interaction with your systems that you get with grid tie. I mean, you know yourself, even if it was an Enphase system, those folks are just looking at those grid tie systems for 3-4 months, and that's about it. There's just not a lot of interacting with grid tie until the end of the month when you get your bill and you see it's $3 or something. That's a beautiful feeling. And well, I just feel as though they're going to get even more of that feeling of goodness, that feeling of control, that feeling of security when they can take their phone, turn their Jenny on and off, shed loads, put loads back on, because it's a sunny day. These sorts of things I think will be fun. They'll stimulate the kids to write reports for their school, these sorts of things. I really think it's the new platform. And you can really build it out. I mean, you can build these things out to, $100,000 systems with 3 of these guys paralleled in the hub and a generator and all that. So it's really quite nice. Now, I wanted to touch on this, Jason. This is something, that we see a lot in the US. And this is UL 3741. This is a new way to meet rapid shutdown. And the great thing I like about this particular one, and I think we'll hear more and more about this, and I just want to briefly go over this. This is a standard that was developed not only by the PV industry, but also the firemen themselves. So this standard not only talks about the equipment that will perform safety functions on roofs that will help the firemen feel confident that they can saw through these roofs and not run into high voltage DC lines. And well, they participated in this. So it's not just about the equipment, it's about how they work on the roof, how they put their boot and stabilize themselves on the top of that module, like I say, and how they use that heavy boot to actually make contact with the module frame. So they have a particular set of PPE, that they wear. And so they would throw dummies onto these live arrays with 2 faults. You got to have 2 faults, right? In order for you to get that electrocution. And so they focus so much on this new standard that where firefighters participated, it really got me excited. As a compliance guy, you look at this stuff and sometimes you see some separation between the solar industry and other participants, the fossil industry or the firefighters or whatever. But in this particular standard, they really work together, and it's super exciting. You're going to be seeing more module level electronics in your systems. And of course, in the States, we have module level requirements for shutdown. You don't have that on buildings in Canada yet, but I wanted to bring this up into that AP Smart and Tigo. Well, AP Smart is really kind of a one-trick pony with their rapid shutdown, but they also do microinverters and other things. Tigo, they do rapid shutdown, but they also do other optimizers, and NEP is a new player that's doing a monitoring on a module level. And so I guess what I'm saying to you is that Solis is working with a variety of racking manufacturers and module level power electronics manufacturers so that you have that flexibility to set up your systems however you might set it up. Now, of course, monitoring, as I note, is so important these days to get paid. I talk about repowering in commercial systems because one of the cool things about repowering is the interconnection agreement is probably already in place, and the takeoff for the output of the system is probably already in place. The land is there, the permits are there, and so when you complete the repowering job, you can get paid. These communication devices are kind of that last link. These are essentially data loggers. Think of them as data loggers, and each one can hold about there's some controversy on this a little bit, Charge. I know it can hold up to like 3 days, and we've heard that it can hold up to maybe 30 days of memory I think that depends a little bit on how many inverters are running through it, but there is some internal memory in case, you lose connection with the cloud. But these are all plug and play devices. They run on 5 volts. You could actually test the pins 4 or 5 volts to make sure that the port is right. And every inverter has a port for these devices. And so it doesn't matter whether you're using our smallest or biggest inverters, that you always see a port for this external device. Super easy plug and play, comes in Wi-Fi, or you can hardwire right to the bottom of that S2WL Wi-Fi and LAN combination stick in that top right there. And then, of course, cellular. You can get a cellular stick with a 5-year plan, with a 10-year plan, or no plan at all. And you can put in your own Rogers cellular 2-year SIM card in there if you like. So very flexible. And it all goes to the SolisCloud. All of those devices point the data to SolisCloud. And as I note, you could run a hardwire right from the inverter to the also energy data logger, and so there's some real flexibility to set up these systems however you like, and you don't have to use SolisCloud, but we encourage you to take a look at this. You'll be downloading the SolisCloud app, and that's what you'll use to commission your inverter, and that's what you'll then use to monitor your inverter. Of course, you can, as a fleet manager of a bunch of different systems, you might set yourself up as an organization on SolisCloud, and then you can manage multiple accounts across multiple sub-organizations. So super easy to use. And if you want to go through a little kind of an overview of the cloud, I got some links here that when I share this presentation with y'all, you can check out these links and really get kind of a better idea of how SolisCloud operates and what it takes to manage it and that sort of thing. So it's very comprehensive, and you can do a lot there, and you can do a lot of troubleshooting before you get out to the site, these sorts of things. So I think it's going to save you money and truck rolls. And so it's about choice with Solis. You have a very flexible platform, different size systems you can use, from very small to very, to very large. And we actually just introduced recently a new 208 product that's 60K. So don't worry, the biggest houses are no problem for Solis. And I encourage you to take a look at these new hybrids and how, there's so much more to talk about, so much more to discuss. And I think just more capability for your customers. And that's that security and resiliency that battery systems and solutions can bring, I think, are going to bring great happiness to your customers. And that's what we want. So, hey, well, we're running out of time, and I wonder whether or not we might have any other follow-up questions.
We had a couple of good questions here.
Oh, good.
So an anonymous attendee was asking, the Solis hybrid inverters are compatible with microinverter, APS, whole miles, N-phase, etc. So maybe just a brief explanation of AC coupling, how it works, the response of the Solis inverters, and then I'll also pop in as well. Your microinverters, APS, whole miles, N-phase, regardless of who makes them, you will have to be able to get the grid protection settings to frequency watts. So
there you go.
N-phase inverters, whole miles, they're not initially set up to AC couple with any battery-based system. That's a different grid profile, and you have to contact the manufacturers to get them changed.
And what he's speaking to there is that the hybrid is a grid forming inverter. And so what we encourage you to do in that case, the Hoyle-Mills or the N-phase system, for example, is that you will move that interconnection breaker from the main panel into the backup panel, so that when the power goes, and it's a bypass, it's like the backup panel is connected to the main panel. You'll actually have the inverter on what they call bypass mode, and you'll set that up so that when the power goes out, the hybrid will grid form, and then the N-phase system or Hormels will look at that as the stability of the voltage and hertz rate, and then it will connect. And the beauty of the Solis product is that it has a PCS in it. That is, we can set the power, we can set the rating of the service panel bus bars, let's say 220 or something like that. So, and then, so when the power goes out, the grid forming inverter will then go into what we call frequency watt mode, and you'll see that now the N-phase system is detecting stable voltage in hertz. Cool, I'm connecting. And so now you've got your PV and connected to your N-phase inverters, and they're feeding power into the backup panel. And then the Solis hybrid itself is also feeding power into there, but if it detects that there's too much power flowing into the backup panel, what it'll do is it'll start increasing the frequency. And this is what Jason was talking about, is that the frequency might get to a point where the N-phase system will go, uh-oh, outer range, bang, shuts out, right? And so that's sort of the default mode, where if you set up what Jason was talking about in the thing, it'll kind of gradually derate sort of the end phase inverters so that we stay under the bus bar max of that. But that's the beauty of these systems and how they can work together to utilize the entire investment that you have in solar at your house. Jason, did that sound kosher?
Yeah, absolutely. Just wanted to make sure people understand that even though hybrid inverter and an AC microinverter may both be capable of AC coupling together, both devices have to be set up to do so.
Exactly right. The AC couple device has to be set up for frequency watt mode, and the inverter has to be told, that hey, this bus bar has a max of this, and so again, that's part of that backup mode setup, as it's not part of your normal commissioning process, where you're just basically going to take the standard self-use mode and just set it up for essentially focusing on the battery, making sure the battery's full, ready for your resiliency, that kind of thing. But you can get into detail, and it's in that backup mode area that you get into the detail. And it's quite fascinating, as an installer, you're going to spend a good half hour or an hour or 2 hours, right? I mean, let's not fool ourselves in when you do your first setup. And indeed, our service group does do commissioning exercises. And so they may not be able to get there physically during that, but you can get on the phone. You can have them on the phone during your first commissioning process. That's something we do all the time. And so, indeed, it's about that compatibility and capability to utilize your investment that you already have. Now, of course, Jason, it's a horrible situation if we have an Enphase home system or SolarEdge home and a hybrid. Now they're both trying to grid form, and that's not going to work. And so if you've got a SolarEdge home system or an Enphase, whatever they call it, their backup solution, you're now going to be installing a Solis, just a regular grid tie product in parallel with them. You can't install another grid forming inverter into that system. Everybody got that?
Yeah, I think that covers
one master.
Yeah.
One master.
A couple more we're going to run through quick. Ian has asked, are there communication range extenders that are compatible if a ground mount is further away when the Ethernet wasn't trenched over? So there's a couple of things there. If we're talking about a hybrid inverter, might not be the best use case if the inverter is far from the load. It'd be way better to bring the DC over. And then in that case, your communications would be close to the home router, things like that.
That's right.
But no, I don't think Solis provides anything. So if you need to be wireless really far, I think a third-party range extender would be the way to go. Am I correct?
think so. Yeah, I would. That's what we do. We do a boost.
Yeah.
And or go cellular. I mean, it's a little more expensive, but if that's an issue. Now, with our commercial product, you can run a Belden type cable, a solid core, 22, 24 gauge, something like that. The best you can do with our Solis inverters is to use the WL data logger, and that allows you either Wi-Fi, and you may try to say, okay, fine, I'll do the WL and I'll try the Wi-Fi, no trenching, and I'll use a Wi-Fi extender, and maybe that'll work. But if it doesn't work, you can always attach a Cat5 cable, Cat5e cable to the bottom of the WL data logger, and there you get you'll get what, 100 meters, right? And that's about as far as 100 meters, 100 feet?
100 meters, reliably.
So that's about your distance. So I would recommend, that you look at that data logger that's a combination of Wi-Fi and LAN. We call it the WL. Yeah.
One more question. I hate to answer these ones kind of live, but the question was, maybe I missed it. Does this inverter allow a 200% DC overbuild? For example, 20 kilowatt DC into a 10 kilowatt inverter. So I'll just start by saying whatever inverter you choose, if it has a maximum DC wattage input listed, you have to follow that. And then you have to both fall within your ISC and your VOC rules. But Terrence can talk about the available window and oversize on the inverters is quite extensive with Solis.
Well, indeed. Whether you stay in our, let's say, MPPT operating window, or better yet, you stay within our full power MPPT voltage window, I don't care. What I care about is whether or not you exceed 600 volts under any conditions. The hottest day, 1.25 sun, you know, in Ontario, I don't care where. If you are under my ISC number, my short circuit current number, you're within warranty. And so when you look at these 2-to-1 DC AC ratios, you know, there's going to be a lot of clipping involved and that sort of thing. But, you know, maybe maybe you have the space and you just want that table, you know, graph where you're producing full power from 9 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. Okay, that's fine. Solis inverters are designed to be run at 100% for the warranty period, 10 years. You can do that. But you just got to make sure that you stay under the 600 volt short open circuit number. So under any open circuit conditions, very, very cold conditions, you're not going to exceed 600 volts. And you're not going to exceed that short circuit current number, which happens to be 22 amps on my hybrid. And so, you know, if 26 amps actually on the hybrid, 22 amps on the grid tie. And so what I'm saying is, go for it. You can do 2-to-1. You can do one. And my final recommendation on that, Jason, is that if you look at our data sheets, you'll see that all of our inverters have a DC voltage rating. And for example, on our hybrids and that sort of thing, it's around 330 volts. And then you'll see that it has a max input current. This is the max current that you can send to our MPPT without clipping. So for example, on the 14 amp 10K inverter. So 330 times 14 amp is like 4,600 watts. And so that's what you can do to always determine kind of the max, let's say, manufacturer's recommendation power limit for any of our MPPTs. So take a look at our data sheets and you'll see, again, rated DC voltage and max input current for the MPPT. You'll see a max input current and you'll see max short circuit current. The max input current, you know, might say 14 amps, but you're putting or let's say it says you're using our hybrid and it's 16 amps, and you end up using a Jinko 710 watt panel that does 17 amps. That's fine. You can do that, but you better not exceed 600 volts. And just understand that when that inverter is seeing full sun, it's going to be clipping that 17th amp because it can only accept 16. But I don't care if it's clipping that 17th amp. That's a design decision you're making for your customer who wants that table graph. He's going to see a lot of clipping. There's a lot of money wasting. There's not good LCOE, levelized cost of energy in the system, but there's damn good production in that first 5-10 years. And so what we're saying here is that it's a customer decision. And all you need to do as an installer is make sure you're watching those short circuit current and open circuit voltage numbers and go for it. And as I note, there's what I would consider an MPPT max power limit, but don't think of it as a limit. Think of it as our max guidance, and do your diligence on the coldest day and the hottest days to really ensure that you're just not going to have a problem with claiming an RMA or a warranty because you designed those strings correctly. I kind of went on there, didn't I, Jason? Right past the number, right past 3.
But no, it's really good. Good explanation. Lots of those questions are asked like yes or no, and you guys to be clear. It's always a maybe, right?
You're not going to get that from me, Jason. You're just not going to get that. We want you to know. We really, and design is so critical. And this is where you're matching, customer use case. This is where you're really making real what you heard from the customer, how well you listened. You know, this is the stage, that design stage, and that's the part where a distributor like Charge or a manufacturer that's fully engaged with you guys, that's where you're going to find that help. Thanks a lot for listening to me today. I know I went over again. I love talking about this stuff. And I hope you learned a little bit about Solis, the products, and maybe some of the flexibility you need to look at with other products as well. You know, I mean, we're in a big universe here, and we want your customers to be happy. So I hope some of them will be happy with the Solis system. And we look forward to any questions you might have after this webinar, and send them along. We got pretty much get us anywhere you want. And Jason has my direct information. So contact Charge and find out what's going on with their inventory and with their services and that sort of thing. And I just want to thank you, Tatum. Jason, it was great having you on board with us. I don't know how I couldn't have done this without you, and I appreciate you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome, Terrence. I'm just going to answer one more quick question here. Does the hybrid Solis work with dumb batteries, including AGM? And technically, no, it doesn't, unless you could find an AGM rated to a minimum of 120 volts.
Right.
The battery for the hybrid inverters want to be within 120 and 500 volts. So no, it's not AGM battery.
Yeah, I mean, we do hybrids around the world, and we do some low voltage stuff, and we might look at some kind of request for that, where we have a lot on our plate and with products that we're introducing. But remember also that a lithium ion charging curve is kind of, it starts out and then drops and then starts flat, and the voltage stays pretty steady and then it drops off, right? Whereas a lead acid charging curve is a little bit more linear like that. And so even if you were to put, 150 volt lead acid battery in there, I worry about the charging algorithm and how it might match up with that. And so, let's put one on there, Jason, and see if we can't blow one up.
You could definitely blow it up, I'm pretty sure.
So anyway, thanks, Tatum. Appreciate all of you. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much, Terrence. Take care.
Bye now.